Of all the things people do, finance may be the one that's least understood by the average person, and in the mass media, it's the one that people are most quick to condemn. So you will recall last week we were talking about the unrighteous steward and his plan to secure future homes for himself, and it struck me that this really could have been one of the places I turned to think about Jesus and finance. Not only is finance woven into the fabric of the story, but the point of the story, as Jesus makes clear in verse 9, he says, I tell you, make friends of yourselves by means of unrighteous wealth, so that when it fails, they may receive you into the eternal dwellings. On the one hand, we do see a certain skepticism towards financial dealings, particularly by the label of unrighteous wealth. The steward is the steward of unrighteousness, or the manager of unrighteousness. And then in verse 9, it's the mammon of unrighteousness, or the wealth of unrighteousness. So there's kind of a negative appraisal. At the same time, we recognize that it is the means by which one is going to secure eternal dwellings. And we talked last week in detail about how that refers to one's open-handed generosity with what one has, such that this demonstration of your commitment to God by being committed to his people is what, in one sense, functionally welcomes you into the kingdom. And so wealth then presents challenges, temptations, to the point where it can be labeled unrighteousness, or unrighteous. Remember last week we said it's not that a dollar bill is intrinsically unrighteousness. I was thinking yesterday, it's not as if dollar bills congregate on the sidewalk with switchblades and curse words and just harass passersby for no good reason and therefore demonstrate the intrinsic unrighteousness of wealth. No, it's just a tool, like a hammer or a shovel, which you could use to build or to dig or to beat someone with, which is really not a recommended use of either implement except in emergency. But it's not the shovel's fault, right? If it's bashing a neighbor's head about, that's the wielder who's in trouble. But as we'll see momentarily, what money is, because it's in the hands of unrighteous people, it becomes, as it were, sort of infected with their unrighteousness. It becomes the tool of unrighteousness, and therefore Jesus can label it as such. But as I said, at the same time, it's the means by which you can be a blessing to others as well, and therefore has a key role in Luke's economy of divine salvation, taking what you have and shrewdly using it for blessing others. But as I said, that was last week, and we really wanted to turn to Matthew 25 and the well-known parable of the talents to get one more critical piece of the puzzle here. So you will recall that talents are not what we talk about talents as in talent show, right? That it's a lot of money, and estimates vary, but suffice to say a lot of money. But the irony is that when we get to the application, the point is not that this is about investing money per se. It's about investing all that you have, all that's within your capacity to do, and therefore, in that sense, broadly speaking, talents. But that's just an accident of the language, not a literal translation or something. So everything we have is meant to be poured out into God's service, and when we do that, then God blesses us. And money is a part of that exercise of faithfulness to God. We, I think, get a pretty clear sense of that in the next parable, the famous image of the sheep and the goats, where those who have exercised open-handed generosity, particularly to the poor of the community, they're blessed, and those who have refrained from doing good with what they have, they are sent away from God's presence. So the lesson, in essence, is pretty much the same as we saw in Luke 16. We want to take what we have and use it for the good of the kingdom by, once more, open-handed generosity. And we can talk about the role of shrewdness in that generosity when we get our panelists up here. But the reason I wanted to talk about this story in particular is the kind of hidden premise here, hidden being an unfortunate choice of words given what happens to the last servant, I suppose, but the hidden premise is that there is such a thing as economic growth. And there is this almost magical principle at large in the world that Jesus can here draw upon, not because he's giving a subtle defense of capitalism, that's not really what's in view here. Nonetheless, he implicitly recognizes that there's this magical principle where you have a bunch of money and you invest it in some way and suddenly there's more of it. And it's just one of the things that strikes me as someone who is very limited in his economic understanding at practically every level. Nonetheless, I think I correctly discern that there's something remarkable about economic growth, that things can turn into more things when you invest them wisely. So what I'd like is for Bob to open us up just by explaining what money is and why finance exists. It's a pretty basic question, and yet when you stop and think about it, we often don't stop and think about it. We have no idea what it is we're either extolling or lamenting, and what's going on with it.
I'm Bob Goff, and I am a real live economist. Sean caught me in the hallway downstairs and asked me if I'd do this.
The dean of preparation here.
So I had a lot of prep time.
Yes.
But what Sean did not know is that my grandfather, many, many years ago, told me that there are 3 things in life that you need to be prepared for to do on a moment's notice. And those 3 things are preach, pray, and die. So I very, very much hope that Sean's request is in the arena of the very first. What is money? Money is simply a medium of exchange. That's it. It replaced barter, your service or your product in exchange for something else. Then societies became more complex, and you started to see the first formations of capitalism sometime during the 1200s, believe it or not. And so financial systems started to be developed simply because of the fact that things became complex, and people started using money for the purpose of leverage. And that means gaining interest on lending of money, better known as debt. Jesus never said that money was bad. Jesus said that the love of money is bad. And so consequently, money is simply a medium of exchange that morphed or evolved into financial systems because of the complexity of economic life. God gifted us, blessed us, because of his sovereignty, with different types of gifts, different types of talents. So therefore, you are better at certain things than I am. I'm better at certain things than you are. And so consequently, when we go off and to apply our gifts and talents and develop whatever it is that we're good at, whether it's a product or a service, then we have to interact with one another. God did not make us self-reliant. And because of the fact that we are all interrelated, I produce certain things that you need, and you produce certain things that I need, all of a sudden we can analyze that in the form of what you demand, what I supply, and what I supply and you demand, etc. Hence, supply and demand curves.
I'm David Hanna. What I specifically do is help very large, sophisticated organizations with really complicated investment plans. Like anything, the small minority often takes on the persona of the whole. We know this as Christians, right? Some people have horrible views of Christians because they knew one person who did something, and they don't know the hundreds around them that are wonderful people doing great things. So I think that's true of the financial business in general. With investment management in particular, you have a subject that many people know nothing about whatsoever. So I know many people who are PhDs and brilliant people, and when you talk about a stock or a market, their eyes just cross. So there's a great responsibility to help manage their money in a responsible way. And the point of that is that they have money for retirement. They have money to pay for their child's college. So there's an investment sense that the person's future, the family's future, really depends on how you handle their assets.
Do you face particular temptations in the financial industry? One imagines that a purveyor of donuts might be tempted to to sample the snacks too often. And since you're in money, does that present either at the level of kind of individual struggles as you're working in this industry, what do you wrestle with, but also kind of corporate culture? Are there some things in the financial world, the corporate culture, which present unique temptations or which you find difficult to deal with?
Hi, I'm Janice Sweatland, and I majored in finance. I have been in finance for the last most of my life. I've been in different industries. I've been working in a rotary kiln bricking machine company, healthcare, and for the last 21 years in the lighting industry. And so I'm the person who's done journal entries to studying economic indicators that would affect our industry. So you can put something in the wrong column and make your financials look better. And when you do that, as an accountant, you can do that. You can make a journal entry and make your books look better, thus cooking them. And you can participate. You can be asked to do such a journal entry and change the financial results, which might change your stock price. And that's where, do you refuse to do that, or do you just do what you're told? So I've had a couple colleagues who've done what they were told and are no longer with the company. So I think that's on the front line. As an accountant, you can, or a financial person, in your role, you can have temptation. When I was 18, I was a cash office clerk at a retail store. And this is back in the day when people wrote checks and used dollar bills. And I would balance and count and do all this. And I remember about $30,000 in cash on my desk. And just going, wow. It's like a new car. But they entrusted me with that. And I could have slipped a $5 in my pocket, probably, and tried to figure out how to hide that. But they entrusted me, and I took it really seriously. And I think all of us, wherever you work, are entrusted with something, whether it be your expense account, how much paper you use, or gauze. I don't know. There's just thinking about anything that you use as much gauze as you need on a but that no matter where you're working, is you are entrusted with some kind of resource, and that's, I'm just looking at it, everyone's, where do you work, and what, your time, are you wasting time? Are you on Amazon.com during the day too much? Or so time and resources, we're all tempted every day.